CDD happens to be the national partner for Afrobarometer in Ghana. And for the AB R9 survey, CDD-Ghana conducted the survey in Ghana in April, as I did mention earlier. So today's section will prioritize some key thematic areas for discussion and for dissemination. As Nana Ekuya earlier mentioned, the economy will be of focus, and I think you all agree with me that there is no better time to have a conversation on the economy. Also, e-levy will be of interest. We will share our findings around what citizens are thinking around the e-levy, taxation in general, but focusing or narrowing it to the e-levy largely. Then the public service delivery. There have been conversation around the state of public service delivery in Ghana. What are citizens saying about service delivery generally? The dissemination will focus on that as well. So I want to thank you on behalf of the center for responding to this invitation. As I said, you are all keen and eager to hear the details, the granular details of the findings from this particular survey. That's the round 9. So I won't take too much of your time, and I hope to get the opportunity to come back to contribute to the discussion. CDD is grateful for responding to the invitation, as I mentioned, and I want to use this opportunity to officially welcome you to the center. We hope that you will contribute to the presentation, after, the discussions after the presentation. Let me also take this opportunity to welcome our online participants. We hope that we don't really forget them in the course of the conversation. We will continue to keep an eye on our online participants so that we have a blend of conversations that involves the in-person participants and the online participants as well. So thank you, and let's have a very fruitful conversation this afternoon.
Thank you so much, Paul. I see one of our panelists online, Dr. Theophilus Echampon. Good to see you. And I see Kwekwa also there. Very soon we'll be getting to you. I'm itching to know exactly what Ghanaians are saying, especially when the survey was done in April. Paul, you mentioned April. And it was a month into the implementation of e-levy. We had a lot of conversation when you go to the streets. Well, I would want to know the survey, what methods went into it, the number of people, what ways you went into getting your information. And I wouldn't do that for you. Lionel Ose Esima, he's the Afrobarometer Assistant Survey Manager, North and West Africa. He will be telling us about the Afrobarometer and survey methodology for this particular one. Let's do it for him. Thank you.
Good afternoon, everyone. As we all know, Afrobarometer does conduct surveys. And in doing those surveys, we use a nationally representative sample of adult citizens. In the sample, all respondents are randomly selected. And in our sample, we make sure that it is distributed across regions, states, provinces, and rural urban areas in the proportion to their share in the national population. In that sample, every adult citizen has an equal chance of being selected. We do face-to-face interviews in the language of the respondent's choice, which means that we don't only conduct surveys in the official language of the country, which is English for Ghana. We do make sure that our surveys are translated in the most spoken 4 or 5 local languages in the country. And for Ghana, we have used Ewe, Twi, Gan, Dagari, and Dabani. Our standard questionnaire allows comparison across countries, and over time, you know, Afrobarometer operates in 34 countries. So our results allow us to do comparison across, depending on the thematic areas that we choose to do analysis on. Our sample size for Ghana was 2,400 adult citizens, with the margin of error of plus or minus 2 percentage points at the 95% confidence level. Fieldwork in Ghana for 9 was conducted between 4th and 20th April of this year. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Lionel. And we will get into the main meat shortly. We'll be telling you the details of this survey on the economy, taxation, and public service delivery, highlights from round 7 survey. And to do this presentation for us is Dr. Edem Salome. She is the Director of Research, CDD-Ghana. She has all the filler. I have been itching. I wanted to get the findings yesterday. It was a banter between myself, Mami Ukia, Mami Ufa, and Josephine. But she's here to give it to us. So if you are ready like I am, please, let's put it together for her. Thank you.
Am I supposed to use a mic? Can I just speak without a mic? Okay. All right, good afternoon to you all, and thank you for being here one more time. It's always exciting when we get the Afrobarometer results from the field. Everybody is expectant as to what Ghanaians are saying. I would ideally have started with what Afrobarometer is about, the methodology and everything, but thankfully my colleagues have done that for me, so I'll be going straight into the findings. But before that, I'd like to say a big thank you to my team of analysts led by Mavis Zupok, Awal, Mausi, Daniel, and everybody who's been a part of this Afrobarometer adventure. It's always a lot of work that goes into collecting the data from the field. Especially we go to every corner of Ghana to collect citizens' opinions so we can share with you. So thank you all, thanks to my team. I'm sure you'll hear from them very soon. So I will go straight to the demographics first, because I think Lionel didn't mention that. Our sample size, of course, just like in many of our Afrobarometer surveys and other surveys, is always 2,400, and it cuts across the demographics of our society, which is, which operating it cuts across the demographics of our society. So men and women, the genders are covered. But in Afrobarometer, the reason why you see a 50-50 split is because we do what we call gender alternation. So if the first interview is with a man, the next is with a woman. So that's why we have a 50-50 split. In terms of residential areas, our survey covers, of course, the rural and urban areas. And for us, it's 60 for urban and 40 for rural. In terms of education, and it does reflect the educational levels in our society as well. So for no education at all, it's 15%, primary is 25%, secondary 41%, that's the largest in our sample, and then post-secondary is 19%. It covers the religions as well, so we see Christians 76% and Muslims 16%, and other religions is 6%. I just want to also show that the sample survey distribution mirrors what we find in our latest census figures. So, can you show that one? Or you don't have? They don't have it. Oh, it's okay. So it does mirror the census data also, so that those who question the sample size of 2,400 would be reassured that it does reflect what our society shows us. So you can see the Afrobarometer sample is what's on your extreme right, and then the census data is on your left. So I think I can now move on to the findings. And I'm going to begin with a very key question. One of the key questions we ask in the Afrobarometer survey, where we ask our respondents to tell us what their most important problem for government to solve is. And we ask this question in a way so that they tell us what their first response is, the first problem they want government to solve, then the second one, and then the third one. And then we now collate that and see what comes up tops. So in this survey, in the round 9 survey, management of the economy came up top, followed by unemployment and infrastructure. And these are usually the three usual suspects when we ask this question. And we also try to look at that over time to see what the trends are. Now, in the last Afrobarometer survey, management of the economy didn't even feature at all. In our pre-election survey, in our post-election surveys, which are different from Afrobarometer surveys, the management of the economy also did not come up as the first priority. But in 2022, yes, that's correct, it comes up as the first priority that Ghanaians are saying that the government should address. Again, this is followed again by management of the economy as a second priority. It ties in with unemployment, which usually comes in first or second, and then followed by infrastructure. So in round 8, infrastructure and roads was the first priority. But in round 9, we see that management of the economy has come in twice. So it's very important to Ghanaians. All right, so we move on to evaluation of the country's economic conditions. Again, we see that Ghanaians are consistently rating the country's present economic conditions as fairly good or very good. There's also a notably sharp decline between 2017, 2019, and this year's round in terms of where Ghanaians are, how Ghanaians are evaluating the economy. We see a decline of 24 percentage points between 2017 and 2022. And then we also see a 19 percentage drop between 2019 and 2022, which is this year's round. So we see the decline over there. So let's move on to this is the evaluation of the country in terms of economy. Now, what about people's living conditions? How are people rating their personal living conditions? Again, we see the same trend that ratings of personal living conditions as very good or very good or good or very good has dropped again from 2017-19 by 70 percentage points in this year's round. So one of the ways we try to drill down to see who is saying what is to look at the demographics of who is saying what. So we are now looking at who is evaluating the economic conditions of the country negatively by demographics. So let's not get it wrong. It's not everybody. We're just looking at those who said the country's economic conditions were poor. So that's what this chart shows. Again, we see that across the demographics, which is the rural-urban divide, whether you're a man or woman, whether you're age 56 or 18 years, they have the same views about the economic conditions of the country. They are rating it negatively. Another way we try to see how optimistic Ghanaians are, and any time I'm presenting this particular finding, I always say that Ghanaians are the most optimistic people, because when we ask this question, people are very optimistic about the future of the country in terms of economic conditions. But in 2022, which is in this round, we see that Ghanaians are becoming less optimistic about the country's economic conditions, while we see that a solid 70% are saying that the economic conditions of the country compared to 12 months ago, which is last year, are much worse or worse. And we also see that 1 in 2 are saying that the economic conditions of the country will be better or much better in 12 months, which is, I mean, it's a small number that's hopeful that the economic conditions will be a lot better in future. So there's a lot of pessimism there about the future economic conditions of the country. Again, we'll look at that in terms of who's saying seeing the economic conditions in a negative light by the demographics again. Again, you see that the same trend across all of our demographics. Regardless of where people live, their age or their gender, they have the same views about the economy. So then how are they actually assessing government in terms of managing the economy? So again, we're looking at this as a trend from 2012 through to the current round, which is 2022. Again, we see huge changes in terms of when it comes to managing the economy. We see a huge drop of 29% drop from 2012 to 2022. Creating jobs, we see a drop again by 16 percentage points. Improving living standards of the poor, again, we see a 19% drop there. Narrowing income gap, the gaps between the poor and the rich, we see a huge jump again of 20 percentage point drops. And then keeping prices stable, again, we see a 17 percentage point drop again with that as well. So overall, the picture doesn't look good in terms of, citizens' assessment of government performance of the economic conditions of the country. Now, we call this a deprivation of basic necessities in the sense that we have certain questions we ask our respondents to tell us what they've been deprived of over the last year. And we assess this by lack of cash income, medical care, water, food, and shortage of cooking fuel. So this is what we call our lived poverty. This is how we calculate our lived poverty index in Afrobarometer. We use these indicators. Again, you see that in the last 12 months, a lot more of our respondents reported that they have gone without a cash income. Now, this trend, I can say, has been consistent over the last rounds, including our pre-election and post-election surveys, where citizens are reporting a lack of cash income as the most reported deprivation, followed by all the others: medical care, water, food, and cooking fuel. So now, as I said earlier, we use those indicators to calculate what we call the lived poverty levels. And now we kind of divide these per people who have no lived poverty, which means that people who have not reported a lack of any of those basic necessities that I mentioned. Then when it comes to low lived poverty, it means that people who have reported just, marginal, half and half of, those indicators. Now, moderate lived poverty also measures that. Again, you see that only half of our population who's saying that they have experienced low lived poverty at some point. Again, we look at this over time from 2017 to this year, 2022. We see that there's been an increase in the number of Ghanaians who reported experiencing a moderate to high lived poverty. Similarly, those who said no lived poverty has also shrunk from 2017 through to 2019, and then it keeps going down up to this year. We'll look at that by the demographics as well. We don't see that much change in terms of our 2019 results and then the 2022 results. It cuts across the demographics again. So I am now going to move to public service delivery. It's one of the things that we as citizens, as Ghanaians, always worry about. It's one of our key questions in the Afrobarometer as well. How well is government doing in terms of the delivery of public services? And again, public services are part of the indicators that we use in measuring the lived poverty. So it's important that we look at that as well. All right. So with this particular result, it's not a question that we ask our respondents. It's our field workers who observe in what we call the enumeration areas. Now, when we are doing the field work, there are enumeration areas where people go and ask the questions. So we ask our field workers to observe the physical presence of certain public services, right? So they would look, so when you look at school or hospital, it doesn't matter whether it's a public or private facility. So far as it is there, it is present. This also does not measure the quality of what the structure is about. So it's just the presence of that facility or service. So in terms of presence of public infrastructure, it's schools that we see a lot of, and which is good. In our enumeration areas, we see a lot of electricity grid as well. Now, the interesting thing about electricity grids from other surveys was that we'd find that there's a lot of electricity grid, but people don't have electricity in their homes. So it's also a very interesting thing. We see a lot of health clinics as well, piped water, whether There's pipe water. I don't know, maybe. Do we ask whether there's water flowing through the taps? Or it's just a pipe? All right, so we don't know whether there's water flowing through the tap, but pipe water is also present. The least present service is, of course, police stations. But, of course, 35% is good enough. So I'll move on to the ease of obtaining. So now we're going to the experiential part of the availability of the facility. So with this, we are looking at the ease of obtaining public services from the facilities that are present in our localities. Again, we see that people had a lot of ease accessing schools and medical care, and then identity document is trailing, at the bottom. That people had a lot of difficulty accessing identity document as compared to, public schools or medical care. And this is the sad part of it, that whilst they had to access some of these services, some people had to pay a bribe. And top on that list is the paying of bribe for police assistance. 45% of our respondents are reporting that they paid a bribe to get police assistance. And when they paid the bribe, followed by paying a bribe again to the police to avoid getting into trouble. And then they paid a bribe again to get an identity document, and then followed by public schools paying a bribe to get their awards into public school, and then medical care, which is sad that people have to pay a bribe to get medical care. Now we'll look at that in terms of how government has performed over time in providing these public services. Again, we see the nosedive in terms of the evaluation that our respondents have offered when it comes to improving basic health services, that the percentage change from 2012 to the current survey is 22% drop. We see this trend go on and on until we get to providing a reliable supply of electricity where it's just a marginal drop. So I think that the government has done well in terms of providing electricity to all communities. Right, so we ask for things from government as citizens all the time, but governments need revenue to provide what we ask them. So all the public services, all of the things that I've shared with you from the beginning require revenue of some sort to provide them, and taxes are a source of revenue for government. And for us, it's important as good citizens that it's important that we try to gauge how people respond to taxation, whether they know about their duties as citizens when it comes to taxation. So we ask questions about taxation in all of our surveys. And in this year, we didn't leave those questions out. We included e-levy in it, of course, because that was its topical. So let's see what people's views are regards to taxation. So one of the questions we asked was to find out whether people knew the importance of the goals of revenue collection or generation system in the country. And as you can see, over 60% say that they understand that they have to pay taxes to government. They also understand that government needs to reduce the tax burden. And also, they understand also that it has to be a goal of government to use the taxes and revenues it generates efficiently or effectively. Similarly, they also understand that citizens and businesses have to be taxed. But when it gets to things that they are obliged to do as citizens, we start seeing the drop in the numbers. So you see that when it gets to ensuring that all citizens contribute to tax revenue, it's a slight drop from the high percentages that we saw where the burden is on government. And again, when it comes to raising more taxes and revenue, you see a drop in that as well. And this, of course, will segue well into people's opinions about the e-levy. So, as Paul said, I don't know, I think Yokia said that the time we collected the survey, I mean, when we fielded the survey, the E-Levy had just been passed. And we had asked 7 questions. We quickly had to change some of our questions because the E-Levy had been passed. So we needed to ask, of course, what Ghanaians thought about the E-Levy. And as you can see, 67% strongly disapprove of the E-Levy. Only, a small percentage of 9%, just under 10%, say they strongly approve of it. So overall, Ghanaians think that the E-Levy is a bad idea. Again, we asked whether, they thought the E-Levy was a good idea or a bad idea, or whether it was going to put too much burden on them as citizens. Remember that in the previous slide that I showed about taxation, they know that government, the citizens are saying that government has to reduce the tax burden on them. So as you can see again, we see that quite a majority are thinking that the E-Levy is going to be burdensome. Now, we want to look at that by the demographics as well, because it's important. We need to see who's saying what, where they are, what their age, what gender they are. So again, we don't see that much difference, between the normal demographics that we know. But when it comes to who supports which party, then we see a bit of difference there. Of course, we all know, we listen to, parliament proceedings that the opposition NDC has been against the E-Levy. So of course that reflects in what we see over there. Again, we wanted to see, we haven't shown any of these demographics by region, but with this, we thought it was important to see what the regions look like in terms of who disapproves the E-Levy. Again, you see a reflection of that generally, except when you come to the Ashanti region where there's a split as to, whether they really disapprove or approve of it. All right, so I am gradually winding down to the end of my presentation. I hope I'm not, yeah. All right, so I'm also going to share with you whether people are confident about the use of the E-Levy funds. Again, we see that more than half of those we surveyed said that they are not confident at all that money generated from the E-Levy will be used well or for what it's intended. And then, the thing about taxation is people would either avoid it, and that's not refusing to pay tax, it's a difference. So we wanted to see tax avoidance as well. So we wanted to know who intends to continue using, the channels that would, end up taxing them when they use the channel. Again, we see a split there. The Ghanaians are quite divided in terms of their views or whether they want to avoid E-Levy, using channels that would, put the E-Levy burden on them or not. So again, we look at that same question by region. Again, we see the same trends. There's a split in some regions. Some regions are, quite, if you look at northern region, you see that it's quite high. All right, so I'm gradually moving down to the question that most people ask, and it's our signature question. And I'm also glad in a way that many of the surveys that have been done and reported on prior to the release of the Afrobarometer findings have also asked this question. And it's good because then it shows that it's such an important question for policymakers and us all to pay attention to. So, is the country going in the right direction? Again, we will look at this as an over time fine trend analysis to see. It looks like a fish on the screen, though. So we see that majority of Ghanaians say that the country is heading in the wrong direction. And they offer very negative assessments of the country's economic condition and their own personal living conditions. You can see from there that it's only 11% of Ghanaians who say the country is going in the right direction. We also see a 15% drop since 2017, and I'll keep this on for a while. So we study it a bit. That is, you know, the only time that we saw that kind of dip was in 2014, where we conducted the survey, and then of course it went up beyond the 50, almost 60% in 2019, and has dropped so steeply. 35, and has dropped steeply to 11% just a few years, 3 years. And the same way, I mean, whether it's going in the wrong direction, the right direction is what I was reading. The red line is the wrong direction. That is not improving either. That has really jumped up from 3 years ago from 59% to 87%. People like the fish. Okay, so we'll look at that in terms of, you know, the demographics, who is saying what again. So it's not just young people, it's not just women, or it's not just people living in the rural areas. It's cut across the entire spectrum of our Ghanaian society, as you can see. Only, you know, very marginal numbers are saying that it's going in the right direction. All right, so I think I've ended on a high. So I will just recap before I take my seat. So just to recap again, we see that a majority of Ghanaians say the country is heading in the wrong direction and offer very negative assessment of the country's economic condition and their own personal living conditions. We've also seen that 3/4 of Ghanaians disapprove of the e-levy, and they think that it's a bad idea, and they are not confident that the government will use the money judiciously. And then their ratings of public service delivery is also low. We've seen a sharp decline between 2019, 2012, and then the current survey. Thank you very much.
Oh, you can do it better for Dr. Salome. I'm sure some of the responses, you don't need a rocket scientist to tell you that. My takeaway was the bits on the e-levy. I don't know about you. Do you agree with me? Or there's more? I'm sure there will be more. But we've heard the people say what they want to say. What would be your say as well? I'd like to remind you that we are live on Facebook and on YouTube. So for those online, you can get interactive with us with the hashtag ABGhana and hashtag Voices Africa. Also, you can tweet at us at CDD-Ghana. And I'll be sure to read your comments. Shortly, we'll be going for the discussion. We've heard what the people have to say. What will be the solution, if there is any? Will there be answers at all? And as we speak, I gather that Ghana may not get an IMF deal until March 2023. And this is because we have many issues that are still being addressed. If we can get this, I'll be grateful, because we have a panel discussion. I don't know if the stations can tap directly, because our panelists will be speaking. They'll move it. Okay. All right. So I was talking about Ghana going to the IMF, and it looks like we'll be getting a program in 2023. I'm sure Professor Bokpin will be talking more about that with the issue that needs to be addressed. We understand that the IMF is talking about unsustainable debts levels. We are looking at 80% of our debts, and our revenues are also low, 15% of GDP. That is what we are looking at. You also remember that economists asked government to go in for help, and these calls came in a very long time ago, but government didn't listen, and this is where we have gotten to. Mind you, inflation for June today came in, and it is 29.8%. We've heard from the people. Let's hear what the economists also have to say. Professor Bokpin, I know, has been pushing for government to, in fact, abolish e-levy. And he calls for that for the mid-year budget review, which is expected to be presented on Wednesday. But I don't know if Prof will change his mind or he's still sticking to it, but we'll be getting answers shortly. Let me just introduce, before I bring Prof to begin the conversations, Dr. Theophilus Echampong is joining us online, I'm sure. Dr. Echampong is an economist and political risk analyst with over 10 years of experience working with governments as well as private investors and policy agencies and international organizations on natural resource governance and public financial management issues. He has also worked as an independent consultant on various global energy industry projects, particularly upstream oil and gas, and in providing economic analysis and market research covering frontier emerging markets. His specialization includes energy policy formulation, taxation, which is key here in this survey, also investment analysis, the latter of which includes extractive fiscal regime design and modeling. Other areas also include trade and investments promotion and financial analysis of public sector entities, including programming, data analysis, and budgeting. Dr. Echampong also holds a PhD in economics and a Master of Science in petroleum energy economics and finance from the University of Aberdeen, Scotland. He also earned his Bachelor of Science degree in chemical engineering from the Kwame Nkrumah University of Science and Technology, Ghana. He's an associate lecturer at the Center for Energy, Petroleum and Mineral Law and Policy, University of Dundee, and he is also an associate lecturer and honorary research fellow at the Aberdeen Center for Research in Energy Economics and Finance, University of Aberdeen. And finally, he is also a non-resident senior fellow at the Ghanaian think tank, Imani, Ghana. Welcome, Dr. Theophilus Echampong online. I'm sure he can hear us. Doc, if you can, give us a wave. I know Imani says that Ghana is going back to the 80s, facing triple crisis. I don't know how you would address that, but we welcome you. We'll begin the conversation shortly. And next, I'll move to Professor Godfred Bokpin. The A, I always get it wrong. Is it Alufa? Yes, I'm right. So he's an economist and professor of finance at the University of Ghana. He was the head of the Department of Finance, University of Ghana Business School from 2014 to 2018. He was promoted to senior lecturer in 2010, associate professor in 2015, and professor of finance in 2018. He has consulted, and his views are sought by several government and multilateral institutions, including the International Monetary Fund, the IMF, World Bank, African Development Bank, AFDB, UN Habitat, UNDP, USAID, U4 Anti-Corruption Resource Center, Norway. He has also worked closely with civil society organizations, CSOs, including the Africa Center for Energy Policy, Ghana Anti-Corruption Coalition, Ghana Integrity Initiative, and Send Ghana. Professor Bokpin holds a class honors bachelor in science degree in administration, majoring in accounting, and a master of philosophy degree in finance from the University of Ghana. He earned a doctor of philosophy, PhD degree in economics from the Graduate School of Economics, Osaka University, in 2011 in Japan. Professor Bokpin combines three broad disciplines of accounting, finance, and economics, and the interrelations between them in his teaching and research that uniquely distinguishes his output. Ladies and gentlemen, I present to you Professor Bokpin, who will be joining us here for the conversation. Yes, Prof. So I'd like to remind you once again that we are live on Facebook. I would check my Facebook shortly, and I will be ready for your questions and your comments on our panel discussion on exactly what we are going to look at. But before we begin, I want to ask the House, which one do we begin with? Are we looking at taxation first or e-levy? Which one should we start with? Which one should we start with? No, I want to hear from you. You want the evaluation of the economy. Should I reserve the best for the last? I want to reserve the best for the last. Prof, what do you think? Well, I welcome you once again, and I would just want to get your quick comment on the entire survey. We are looking at 2,000. How many respondents did we look at? Let me get that quickly. 2,400 respondents for that survey, which was done in April. Let me just get your first thoughts on the entire survey, and I'll go to Dr. Theophilus there.
Yes, thank you very much. I think, and thank you, CDD, for having me here. I'm very grateful. I think that broadly, the views represent Ghana. And I'm sure as we are all sitting here, we can associate with the findings. That if we took a survey of ourselves here, I'm not too sure that the responses will vary largely from what has been presented. And I think that I believe that this is a wake-up call to government, because when you see that trend, it tells you that confidence in government and government institutions to deliver on the mandate as reposed in them by the Constitution is actually going down, and that is not good enough. And I'm sure if you had done this survey like a week ago, just after the government caved in, I won't say they announced, they caved in by calling on the IMF, I'm sure you would have seen probably a worse response in terms of confidence in managing the economy and all of that. And I'm sure if you look at the speed with which the IMF responded to the call, it tells you that they bought their flight before the call was placed. Right. But it's also sad because this is Ghana we are talking about, right? That which our forefathers fought for, won independence. They wanted us to be ourselves and be in charge and all of that. And this is where we find ourselves. And we are having to discuss these findings at a time when the IMF is in town, concluding their data gathering essentially to come out with a program, right? And the easiest thing to forecast right now is how often Ghana will go to the fund.
Well, I'm sure we'll get into that when we get into the nitty-gritties. But let me also engage Dr. Echampon. Doc, your brief overview before we get into the breakdown of today's survey.
Yeah, good afternoon and pleasure to be here. And thank you for the opportunity. And I see my good friend Bob in there. I think somewhere in there. So regards to everyone. But quickly, I think, look, their findings are pretty consistent and robust with some other work that myself and Prof. Bokpin have also been involved in. The methodology that was followed is quite standardized, so it is robust in that respect. The sampling approach, very, very good. You had 2,400 respondents, that roughly about 2% margin of error, which is really, really good at that 95% confidence interval. And this largely reflects the views of Ghanaians. And if there's one word that I can use to characterize the findings of this survey in the Akan language, there's something that says that enkoyi. So if I can, borrow that word, what this really reflects is the fact that things are not going well, and we must, change course. But I must say that the warning signs were on the wall in that regard. And for many of us who have been involved in this space and following the Ghanaian economy and economic development, this for me comes really as no surprise in that regard. But yes, the take-home point for me, again, just to reiterate that Akan language, that enkoye, things are not going well.
And so does it suggest that, let me just quickly quote that research from Imani Ghana, which suggested that we are going back to the 80s, facing triple crisis, not even at the time in April, but let's juxtapose April when the survey was conducted to what we are looking at now in the month of June and May. Does it juxtapose that? Does it really concrete the statement from Imani Ghana?
Yeah, absolutely. In that respect, and we can pick the e-levy just as an example, where here from the Afrobarometer CDD survey, you're getting almost 74% of Ghanaians, so 7 in 10 Ghanaians saying that they disapprove of the e-levy. In our survey, we're getting 84%, or roughly 8 in 10 Ghanaians also disapproving of the e-levy, and then you get all those regional variations in that respect. And then back to the bigger point of the Ghanaian economy, we have followed the trajectory of the economy, and you can see that the twin, or you can even say the triple crisis that the economy faces, in the sense that we have borrowed a lot, and so the deficit is really out of gear. We're not collecting or raising enough revenues, although the e-levy is not the way to go about in terms of raising revenue. And I think even the other important element is that the supposed economic growth numbers, those big macro numbers that are being bandied about, hides a much bigger picture, which is that inequality is actually worsening in the country. So the benefits or the trade-offs of those growth is actually not necessarily translating to the ordinary man on the street. So in that respect, that is largely, conclusive, or the findings from this survey is largely conclusive with other ones or other research that myself and I, Prof and others have very well been involved in over the period.
Thank you so much, Dr. Echampo. Prof, I'll get back to you since Dr. Echampo has said that on e-levy. Let me go back to the survey, looking at the number of people who are against the e-levy, the percentage. And it's a huge percentage there. I noted that. Why are my papers mixed up? But when you look at the percentage, I don't know if we can look at it from more than 70% are against e-levy. Some economists say that e-levy was overhyped. We were looking at 600 million cedis at the end of the month. Yeah. 600 million cedis monthly, right? But we had government saying we had less than 10% of what we were looking forward to. Was it overhyped? As was suggested by some economists.
Well, I think by design, it was poorly designed. And also, yes, it was overhyped. I believe that the empirics underlining it, they got it wrong, right? Because this is a tax handle that I have control over to some extent. Because there's a way of bypass, right? So, and the reason they were disappointed is because you and I have been working actively to undo the tax burden. And that's what rational agents would do. Nobody ordinarily would want to pay tax, right? Particularly in an environment where we are unsure. And the data also support that Ghanaians don't have confidence in the ability of the state, the government, to manage even the little they collect on our behalf. When it happens that way, to the extent that there's a way to avoid it, we'll choose that as the first option. But we should just know that from day one, it was poorly conceived. And this is not a tax handle you introduce at this time. It doesn't meet the basic principles of taxation in economics. So it's very difficult to situate the tax both at the policy level and implementation. It's not only at the policy level, even implementation, you're going to have a lot of challenges and all of that. So it's a no-go area. And I still think that government needs to withdraw it.
You don't have hope that the numbers would go up in the near future?
The state, in its quest to raise more money, should not become an armed robber. The state, and this nothing less than stealing, right? If you look at the various dimensions, at the time it was introduced, the issue of exemptions wasn't conceptualized. So now we have to accommodate that and all of that. This is what will happen. And I'm not prophesying, I'm not a prophet. When citizens actively engage in methods, strategies, coping strategies to avoid a tax handle, and they succeed, they will extend that to other progressive tax handles and see whether they can try other progressive tax handles in the same way. And then tax avoidance and other things will complicate. Then what it also does is to undermine confidence in state institutions. that the Constitution protects and all of that. So please, let's not put ourselves to that test. And when we say so, it is not as though we are saying that the government should not generate more revenue. We all do recognize that our tax effort is one of the lowest. Of course, it's not as low as Nigeria. Nigeria is just around 6.2% of GDP. Ghana, we are doing around 13 to 15%. But of course, Nigeria won't be a good benchmark, right?
Right.
Okay. Okay, but let's move. But the point that we are making is that there are other progressive tax handles that we can use to raise a lot more money without burdening the faithful few. Right? That is the way to go. The progressivity of your tax structure has a way of undoing the worsening inequality. Okay, because the way the state mobilizes money and the way it redistributes the money, either pre and redistribution, they have implication for narrowing inequality. Right? So, but if you look at it, what we are doing in Ghana, because we are inefficient in deploying the direct tax handles, which will be more progressive in raising more revenue, we don't want to put our effort in there, but we rather want to impose layers of indirect taxes, right? Which does not require the hard work of human beings like from GRA actually doing the work. So what are the mechanisms for e-levy? The charging agent, right, will collect the money and then remit it to who? There's no work there. It's a very lazy way of collecting more money, right?
And Prof, it's
meanwhile,
obvious.
I'll tell you why. Meanwhile, go to the port and see the abuse, right? Look at the exemptions. We've been talking about exemptions, right? And let me tell you why we should not support e-levy. As part of the strategies to exit the 16th IMF program in 2019, one of the things the government did was to assure the IMF, our headmaster, right, that we were going to pass the exemption bill as a way of raking in more revenue. And they agreed. Hurriedly, the exemption bill was sent to Parliament. After we exited the program, that was it. Because there was no real commitment on the part of government to actually pass the what? The e-levy. Now, when it comes to the ordinary Ghanaian, we are exempting them 100 Ghana cedis a day, right? But we are willing to exempt multinationals that are in tax-paying position, billions of dollars. The studies, and this is not just theoretical, empirical data suggests that we are losing between 3 to 5% of GDP annually to exemptions alone. If you do the calculation and you use GDP of 2019, Ghana was losing in excess of 25 billion cedis. Forget about what I'm saying. Go to the 2019 State of the Nation address. Our president told us that the biggest threat to Ghana's revenue base is not e-levy. The biggest threat to Ghana's revenue base is exemptions. You can go and check the State of the Nation address. And that if care was not taken in the next 10 or 16 years or so, we will lose more than half of the revenue base to exemptions. And we're giving the data. In 2018, just some aspect of the exemption, the state, Ghana, lost 4.66 billion cedis through some aspect of exemptions alone. That is almost the same amount we're hoping to generate when the e-levy was recalibrated to 1.5% and started from May.
Prof, 67% of Ghanaians are against e-levy, but I know you are 100% against e-levies. We have 67%
if I'm asleep, I'll be against it.
Of Ghanaians against it. But let me quickly get to Dr. Ichampon. Again, I don't know why I like referring to the report you put out, the research you put out yesterday. Two reasons that have been given for the economic challenges we are facing. One is COVID-19 and its recurring issues, aftermath.
The headquarters for COVID-19 was in Ghana.
The next is Ukraine, Russia. I know Dr. Ichampon has worked on that as well. And Doc, should we throw these two twin challenges, even though it's global, and government keeps hammering, this is the reason why we are in the situation we find ourselves. If not for COVID, if not for Russia, Ukraine, our oil issues would have been perfect and the economy would have been on track. Dr. Prof, I know you want to touch on this, but let me just quickly pick a quick one on Dr. Ichampon.
Let me give you the quick, and I'm sure, Prof's views and mine are very much aligned on a number of issues, But look, the point is that dealing or running an economy, there will always be external shocks, right? And particularly the fact that the world we live in now, with the level of, globalization and connectedness, then means that what happens in far away Ukraine, or even Antarctica for that matter, with climate change, would have an impact on Ghana one way or the other. And that is the very reason why we elect, leaders to manage us through the crisis, and not necessarily seek to create the impression as though, but for the crisis, then things would have been better one way or the other. And in fact, if you look at the data, it is very clear. Even before the COVID, even before Russia, Ukraine, just as we finished the last IMF program, in 2019, we had started debt binging again. And if you even go further back, you look at all the macro, statistics and numbers, with a lot of the excessive borrowing from the Eurobond market, with the interest servicing, you could really foretell that we're headed for a crash. And all that you needed to do, it's like standing by a well, right? Or standing by a big hole. All you need to do is just somebody to just tip you over the edge and you fall into the alley, in that respect. So I don't buy the view that, it is necessarily the Russia, Ukraine, or the pandemic. In any case, there are other countries in Africa, forget about, the global north. The other countries in Africa that have all been, one way or the other, we could argue, been impacted by the, the direct effect of this, whether in terms of commodity prices going up, etc. Why is it that those other countries next door, including Cote d'Ivoire, have managed the situation relatively better than, Ghana's case? What that tells you is that our problems are very much, structural in that respect. We're not adding enough value. We are excessively borrowing, and I have on occasion even had to use the word, that we have become debt junkies to an extent, because we are really sort of fixated, instead of addressing the revenue-related issues, fixing the direct tax systems, the things that Prof was talking about, PAYE, closing the loopholes at the port. What happens is that the political or the politics of it doesn't give us enough room to do that. And so quickly, if you have a problem with financing your budget, what do you do? Let's sell Eurobonds, And these guys would always give you the money. I work within that market here in the UK. And I know if you want $1 billion today, you can get, but of course, you're going to pay heavily in terms of the interest payment on that, in that respect. So those are, for me, really the cracks or the core issues that we need to fix and address as a country, and not seek to blame some sort of external shock as being the sole cause of the current predicament that we find ourselves in. Lastly, in any case, you could even argue that during 2016, there was also a slowdown in the global economy. We saw a slowdown in China, except in that respect, commodity prices actually rather went down. But we saw a similar effect in Ghana. The then finance minister went to parliament in 2014 with an oil price of $99 a barrel. At one point in 2015, it had come down to $37 or so a barrel. So what I'm just trying to paint here really is that these shocks would always be there. It is our response to managing those shocks and the ability to build enough buffers within the system that separates us out from the rest of the other countries out there.
Well, the shocks will always be there, but how do we respond to them? Professor Poppy. Since we are letting the people have their say, the GPRTU, the GRTCC, the concerned drivers say they are increasing fares next week. I'm sure you're aware of that. Again, they are asking government not to try to reintroduce the road tolls. If they plan to, they are going to fight against it. 67% of Ghanaians are against e-levy. And we are talking about issues on taxation. Obviously, the survey says Ghanaians understand they need to pay taxes. But the how is the issue. What is the way forward for us as people?
Okay, thank you very much. I had meant to say something on the COVID-19, the Russia.
Okay, you can give us a brief of that.
The reason Ghana will keep going to the fund is that as a country, we can't have that humility to admit that we got it wrong, right? That to be found, you first have to admit that you were lost. So that we resolve that some of these things will not happen again. We've been doing this blame game for so long. And every regime that took us to the fund, they've got their own reasons. The first time we engaged the IMF was in 1965 under Dr. Kwame Nkrumah. You can check the template we sent to the IMF. You will find external factors. You will also find internal factors. Of course, after the program was designed, Nkrumah rejected it. But the first major economic policy decision we took after overthrow of Nkrumah was to go to the IMF in 1966. You can check the reasons we cited and all of that. So what we are seeing here is actually a global development meeting local reality or weakness. So just as they explained the COVID-19 to us, that those with underlying condition were more vulnerable. I hope you understand that. And were more likely to be swept away than those with strong immune system. That is what is happening here. So you realize that this is a global issue, but the underlying local condition will reveal whether you will survive or you will collapse with it. And that is where we find ourselves. And as Dr. Tio Achampong said, the fundamentals started deteriorating before COVID. Okay? We told the IMF that we will pass the Fiscal Responsibility Act and then also set up the Fiscal Council and a number of other things. We did pass the act, but we never respected the provisions of the act. The fiscal threshold of 5% of GDP, we did not comply with it in 2019. In fact, in 2018, even though the threshold was 5% of GDP, we did around 7.1%. What government did to comply with the act was to treat the energy sector indebtedness and the financial sector cleanup as outliers. Okay, and there was a whole lot of debate around that in this country, whether we should treat it inclusively or exclusively. But at the end of the day, the reality is what is showing up.
Prof, we are already in the waters, yes. So let's find solutions.
So let's come to this.
To come out of it.
I was very excited when they took the road tolls out, because myself and another colleague from ISE were thinking about the most economically efficient way of deploying that. Because if you look at the number of hours people spend just to pay, let's say, 1 cedi in traffic, it wasn't worth it, right? So if you look at the productivity losses associated with that traffic and the health implication, you can't see that. And say, why should I be in traffic for 45 minutes just to pay a cedi to the state? It doesn't make sense. So we were looking forward to the deletion. But what were the replacement? We're looking at two things. One was to load it on fuel, and another was to load it at the point of renewal roadworthiness at DVLA, right? Because you can easily know the number of cars in town, right? And all of that. And you can do the modeling and say that, okay, if you are coming to do your roadworthiness, instead of paying the road toll at the various distributed point, in fact, not all of that actually arrive with the state, right? You could actually show that when you come and do your roadworthiness, you pay. Then that one, you can do progressivity, right? Those with V8 and V12, those who are asking for more wheels, pay more wheels over there, right? And those with less wheels and the rest of them. So you can do that, okay? And then you actually collect the money at a certain point and you can deploy that. So there's a way we should pay for those economic infrastructure. But the way we were doing it really wasn't efficient. Really wasn't efficient. That's one way. Then
you mentioned fuel.
Pardon?
You mentioned fuel.
Yeah, so we settled more. We didn't finish the work, but those were the avenue. But if you look at fuel, and the loadings in terms of the taxes, and the fact that around that time too, the world oil price was going
just
up.
About asking you.
Then the most effective way to do so was to do it at the DVLA level during your road wetness and the rest of it. So I'm looking forward to this being introduced in the media review, right? So that if you go and do
minus fuel. Because already the price is 40,
it will not be on the fuel. But when you go and do your road wetness, you what? You pay. You can do that, how much you want to collect, and then how you want to use it, you can do that. And we'll all be fine with that.
With the scrapping of e-levy, I'm sure.
Yes, and then they should scrap it. And immediately they should pass the exemption bill. That's not the only thing. Over 75% of Ghanaians, part of them also in the formal wage economy, do not pay their direct taxes. That's huge. So when the data tells you this, you don't deploy e-levy to undo that. That's work. It reminds me of a story in the Bible. After Christ had burst onto the scene after a while, they noticed that he wasn't paying his tax. So the tax people followed him and said, Master, we've realized that per our records, you are not paying your taxes. So we expect that officials from GRA and the rest of them, they should be out there. That's where the work is. Beyond that, then you are also looking at even corporate income tax. Look, and we have done this over the years. If you look at the existing tax handles, VAT, CIT, PAYE, and the rest of them, the output gap is so wide, which tells you the level of inefficiency. So the problem we have here is not so much at the policy level, but it's at the compliance and administrative level. So if you look at our VAT potential, what we could actually collect through VAT alone, we are doing less than 45% of that. And part of that is exemptions that we grant. Sometimes to party faithfuls, right? You can't open their containers. People are importing, okay? It's not only in terms of the port, even crude. Importing crude into this country, it's not everything that is captured through the platform. So all these leakages, and studies have shown that Ghana will lose as much as we are able to collect through leakages in the revenue envelope. And when we talk about the leakages, it's not like it leads to the sea. No, these leakages go directly to people's pockets, right? And that is why you have people in public sector and the rest of them. You know, in economics, if you show me your pay slip, I can predict your neighborhood, right? So if you show me your pay slip, I can tell that maybe you should leave behind Odoko Market or here, because we have a fair idea of housing prices. If you go there and they are not there, it means there's something wrong with the system. So we have developed lifestyles that is not sustained solely by our regular pay slip. And the difference, you can account for it through the leakages, which goes round through the same system. So we are the ultimate beneficiaries. You can talk about property tax. Okay?
Right.
And how much we could collect from that, and why we are not doing so well. Then we are also talking about digitization. Okay? We have been trying to digitize some revenue streams, and the internet doesn't work over there. Whether you use 10G or 4G or whatever. Do you know something? We are part of why the system is like this. Part of why the system is like this. If you look at how expensive our democracy is operationalized, highly commercialized and monetized, there's no way any serious Ghanaian can fund his political activity through his regular pay slip. You cannot. So if we conduct such expensive, our democracy is for sale, our morals are lost to the highest bidder. It's not so much about ideas. Look at how political parties conduct their primaries. Look at what they share. People want to even share the Bible,
Prof,
so that they vote for them.
Okay, Prof. Right. So I'll just, since we are live on Facebook and YouTube, I would want to take some comments coming in from there. We have Joseph Dakora. He says, I thought things were repressing when COVID-19 grounded us, but this economy is more than depressing. That is from Joseph Dakora on Facebook. And on YouTube, John Osai Kwapon says, good afternoon, CDD Ghana. Good afternoon, Afrobarometer team. Paradise Roofing says, this is obvious. The survey confirms it. So remember, we are live. The hashtag is hashtag AB Ghana, that is the hashtag, and hashtag Voices Africa. We would move a notch higher from discussions on e-levy. Let's look at the economy in general. We have 87% of Ghanaians saying that the country is moving in the wrong direction. And in terms of public service delivery, we are looking at 45% paying bribe to get police assistance. That's just an instance in the survey that was conducted. And also avoiding getting into trouble. Prof, let me quickly pick the thoughts of Dr. Ichampon on the percentage of Ghanaians who say that the country is moving in the wrong direction. Are you surprised, especially with the percentage we're looking at, 87%?
No, I am not surprised. Again, just to reference the other survey which we did a few weeks ago, we got 9 in 10, so almost 90% of Ghanaians saying that the economy was headed in the wrong direction. Of course, what we didn't have was some baseline data to compare in terms of like the overall trends. And what this CDD survey really shows you is that the gap or the chasm is actually getting much bigger. And that, for me, if you're a policymaker, should be worrying, because it does have political consequences at the end of the day. Because, you know, we've got only 2 years until the next election. And if things are kind of this bad going into the next election, then there could potentially be some repercussions one way or the other in that respect. But what this also for me belies is a much bigger point, really, how most of the development when it comes to public service delivery, everything is concentrated in Accra, right? For that matter. You can throw in Kumasi to that in that respect, but a number of your key towns, your key cities, and the overall spatial development of the country are disjointed in that respect. So if we, after almost 65 years of independence, are still struggling just to put a decent public highway that connects your 2 or 3 key cities that would drive pretty much all the productivity in the economy, then for me, it tells you where our priorities, you know, often have been. And Prof made a very good example or analogy of, you know, the primaries as an example. This weekend, some of the parties will be holding their primaries, and I'm sure all the V8s will be driven there, probably fueled at the expense of the state. They will share some, you know, money and some paraphernalia, and probably drive on that same bad road to get in there. But because they're driving on a V8, you know, maybe they don't feel the potholes as much as the guy who is, you know, going through or sitting through a trotro to get to his location. The point is that we have been, in my view, rather abysmal when it comes to the delivery of public services. And you see this big spatial gap between what is happening in Accra and then what is happening in other aspects of the country. And we need to bridge that divide. But bridging that divide also means we need to get our priorities right in terms of how we raise revenue and how we spend it ultimately. The spending, there's a lot of room for abuse, and we can do a lot on tightening that aspect. We talk of value for money, we talk of contracts and audits. In the past, you know, people would have been castigating others for, you know, sole sourcing and things like that. But that hasn't really changed, or has it, in that respect? And we see other elements about how collectively the abuse and the waste within the system then means that you don't have enough to actually meet and address the needs of the people. So it comes then as no surprise that when you look at the indicators, the inequality as measured by the Gini coefficient actually has worsened for a number of years for us as a country. One small point, just adding to Pro's point on the road tax. I just thought I add this point. Actually, on petroleum products, there is a road fund levy, which is about 48 pesos for every liter of petrol that you buy. So roughly about 5% or 5p of the liter of petrol that you pay for, that money goes into the road fund. I personally support the reintroduction of the road tolls, but we need to administer it much better. And I think we can use the electronic means to actually collect that toll, one. And number two, the bigger point that Prof made, that when you are actually going to renew your road worthiness, you pay, your road tax at that point. That's what I do here in the UK. So anytime I go to, here we call it, do MOT test, and subsequently, once that passes, I have to pay that tax to be able to drive on the road. Thank you.
Dr. Champon, and shortly we'll be coming to you as well to share your comments or if you want to ask. But quickly, we'll be wrapping up on this so that we can invite your comments as well as your questions. Prof, I don't know if the ordinary Ghanaian should prepare himself or herself for any more shocks looking ahead. From the survey, we see that electricity has improved, but Dr. Salome said the poles were there, but some do not have. And for the taps, we know the taps are there. We don't know if water is flowing through all the taps. Infrastructure, school, basic healthcare delivery has also dropped 40+% there. And I was also talking about the bribe bit, which I'm sure you'd touch on. But should the ordinary Ghanaian brace up for more shocks? I know you have close relations with the IMF. Looking at the conversation so far, what should we prepare ourselves for?
Okay, thank you very much. I think one of the slides, Ghanaians have been preparing themselves maybe for a worse moment, because when they ask them in the next 12 months, do you expect things to improve? The majority of them say, no. I mean, they are already putting some kind of inbuilt mechanism, shocks, to absorb that. So that tells you that in the medium to the long term, I'm not too sure a lot of Ghanaians have any hope that things are going to improve significantly. And I'll put it this way. They are the real economists. We can't deduct from what they have said, right? Because there's a way that the macro imbalances feed it to the micro, right? So the data is more from the micro and all of that, but it connects well with the macro imbalances. And if you ask me, look, one thing we all just have to bear in mind is that we are not going to get out of this mess that easily. We have to take some haircut. And it will be worse for those who don't have any hair to cut. First place, in terms of those who are more at the lower end. With frictions like this, the vulnerable, the socially excluded, they will be impacted more. I mean, if you look at the survey and the responses, as Dr. Tew said, it mirrors the worsening inequality in our country.
So I just checked for you, the percentage of Ghanaians who are hopeful is 25%.
Yes.
Out of 100.
Probably 7. We can't say 7.5 human beings, but 7 out of every 10 Ghanaians are not hopeful. And then let's also look at it this way. An IMF program, it's not, there are adjustment processes that we have to go through in order to correct the imbalances, and that will be painful. It's just like showing up at the hospital. So you can negotiate certain drugs, right, depending on your condition. So they will give you this. So what about this? Okay, given your condition, this is what. But if you show up in the state in which we showed up now, you have to take some bitter pill, right? And the fiscal consolidation, Dr. to you is here. Fiscal consolidation imposes some adjustment costs. And sometimes those adjustment costs are unevenly distributed. So when we say, let's tighten our belt, for all you know, there are some people in government who don't have a belt on to even tighten in the first place. Okay, and we keep tightening our belt until there's no more waste for the belt to be on, right? So this is where we find ourselves. And let's look at it this way. Look, if anybody told you that where Ghana is right now, in the next 1 year, 2 years, things are going to improve drastically for it to impact your pocket, that is a lie. And I'll tell you so because our debt to GDP ratio is at the point where we must take certain painful decisions. And the reason I'm saying so is that the 16th IMF program couldn't even solve the debt sustainability issue. And we've added and added to it. As we speak right now, you know, in the time past, they were telling us that the wage bill is the biggest problem, right? But it's not. The reason the wage bill appears to be an issue is because of our growing debt servicing cost, which is taking more space, right, and leaves nothing left after accounting for compensation. Because if you look at Ghana's compensation bill relative to total expenditure, right, it's not as high as Togo. It's not as high as other comparator countries. It's not. But the reason is that if you look at our debt service to total expenditure, it's one of the highest. In fact, it's the highest expenditure item right now.
80%.
Yes, and it's going to increase. You know why? Because until the IMF announcement, we were borrowing 91-day bill at 22, 24%, 26%. All of that will manifest explicitly in higher debt service provision in the 2023 budget.
Prof, you are scaring me. You are scaring me with your figures.
Oh, I'm not scaring you. This is Ghana we are discussing. This is your country. Okay? And that is why, you know, we started talking about this thing long ago. We said the government should have signed up for the program long ago. Forget about your pride. Right? If you were running your own personal business, you can take certain decisions. I don't care. But, you know, when we talk about the economy, baseline is life. It's life you are what? Managing. This is life. Business itself is life.
Well, Prof, at this point, I would want to invite some comments from our participants here. Professor Baule is here. I don't know if you have any comments on the conversations. If not the conversations, at least the survey, your takeaway from the survey, what Ghanaians are saying in terms of mismanagement of the economy, the e-levy, public delivery of service, as well as taxation. Quick comments, would appreciate. Thank you.
Thank you and good afternoon. I'd like to associate with the discussion so far from my colleagues, Dr. Champon and my colleague. We're actually classmates. So, so I think that at this level, it doesn't. You don't have to be a professor, you know, because I think on the streets of Accra, in my village, things have become much more clearer to us that there's a problem that we need to deal with. And a lot of times, street wisdom in those circumstances have become even much more weightier than the things of books, because I will not be talking theory. If the person is hungry and has to feed themselves, they understand it better than your theory. If businesses are collapsing because things have become very tough, it will show in the faces of people. People are losing jobs, it will show in the faces of people. And so I think that, I do not want to talk a lot, but I think I agree with my colleagues a lot. And for those of us who are still privileged to be working, you would get the heat from the back burner. The people who don't work, relatives that depend on you, the burden is increasing. It's becoming difficult. If you go to the pumps, it shows at the pumps. If you go to the markets, and my wife will tell me that, hey, the cash is not enough. And so the point that I'm making is that it's become very clear that things are not too good. And I think what governments can do in circumstances like that is to be forefront with the people and accept that, look, things aren't going well, and begin to put up communications that kind of would suit the pain of the people, and begin to roll out much more, pragmatic solutions to deal with the problem. And just on that, the issues of leakages, it's a major issue. And I have always said that as a country, we may not have need to borrow if we were holding our purses well, if we were not inflating a lot of the things that we do, if we were not overquoting things that we do, if we were not, and my colleague said it. I mean, ordinarily, if you saw people in business, depending on the size of business, the expenditure of those individuals would show what it is they are able to afford. It's the same thing with people who work for government and who work for institutions. But if it's very clear that between what I earn and what I can live, if there's no match, if there's a mismatch, it tells us all clearly that there's somewhere else that I'm getting something from. And where that something is coming from, we must look for. It looks to me that many times we have, the system that people actually are able to receive things from government from the back door. People earn a lot more from government from the back door. And when that happens, we are unable to control what people receive and how they receive it. But those things we receive from the back door are things that have clear implications for the rest of us and the constraints that we deal with as a country. I think that I want to stop here.
Thank you so much, Prof. And on the back of what you said yesterday, my 6-year-old was asking me, why do we still buy from the supermarkets? There's a mini mart in my neighborhood in Adenta. And I said, oh, but it's not bad. He says no. His friend told him his mother has been going to Mokola market to buy the Cerelacs and the Pringles and all. We used to buy Cerelac for 1 cedi, 20 pesos somewhere May. The sachets, one. It's not 2 cedis, it's 3 cedis. Yesterday we bought, I wanted to buy the whole, it's 10, it's in rows of 10, the strips. So I wanted to buy a whole strip, and the gentleman told me just one is 3 cedis, and I changed my mind. I just bought, no. One was 1 cedi, 20 pesos, but now one is 3 cedis. So I just told the gentleman I've changed my mind. I want Milo instead, because when you use Milo, at least you get to save some.
You are flexible to add more.
Yes. And I'm sure that justifies why organized labor is asking for the cola. Yesterday, the meeting, I don't know how the meeting ended yesterday. Some were sitting there, but I know the executives were out, and I'm sure this is the reality on the ground.
What is happening. We receive a wage increase of 7%, right? Inflation being 29%. We have gone down by more than 21%. Our real wage is negative to that extent.
I see. Well, there's a question. Okay, all right. Doc, you want to have a remark on this one before I go to... Okay, let me just come to you before I go for my next question.
Just 2 quick remarks.
Okay.
I have to go at some point. But, I mean, look, the solution to our woes is in a document that the IMF produced for us when we last exited the program in 2019. So the last review, they made a very interesting statement. I'm going to read it for us all to reflect on it. And it says that, quote, sustained fiscal discipline is needed to reduce financing needs and anchor debt dynamics. So fundamentally, we're in discipline. The fiscal space is needed to support priority programs, while off-balance or off-budget expenditures should be avoided. That's one of the things. We should advance progress on structural reform when it comes to our state-owned enterprises. There's a report that was produced or has been produced every year by the Ministry of Finance, and it shows you the leakage In fact, the hemorrhaging of resources at a lot of our SOEs. And then lastly, also talks about the fact that debt collateralization and revenue monetization should be limited to avoid encumbering revenues. And planned infrastructure projects should be transparently managed and be consistent with debt sustainability and ensure value for money. This was when we last exited the fund, what they told us. None of these things we've actually been able to do and do it, well enough. So in that respect, the solution is partly available to us. The challenge is that the politics is too much, and we are, literally not having the room or the space to have a proper conversation on what needs to be done and how we are going to do it in that respect, especially when it comes to when it comes to growing more of what we eat. So just my last point, you gave the example of the Cerelac. I'm asking myself, can't we grow the produce that is used for making the Cerelac locally? Don't we have enough local legumes, your millet, things like that we can actually substitute with for Cerelac? And the whole idea of this expensive imported taste that we have acquired as a people. I remember we used to eat Tom Brown and things like that. But how many people or how many folks actually eat Tom Brown these days? So as much as we need to do stuff on the bigger macro issues, at the micro level, I also think collectively as Ghanaians, we can do more to consume more locally and help, the economy overall. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Dr. Jambo. And Prof, on the back of what Dr. Jambo said about the issue, about the issue of Cerelac and local production, I know that there are amazing entrepreneurs in the country doing their own thing, but I ask myself, when students are in school, how equipped, how prepared are they to get into entrepreneurship rather than seek for white-collar jobs, as we do? I am a corporate, even though I'm an entrepreneur on the side. We all want to work in a plush office. We want to get our monthly salaries. How do we also prep our students to get onto the market, do things for ourselves in terms of the microeconomy to transform into the macroeconomy?
All right. Well, that's interesting. If unemployment is going up, you may be tempted to think that the way you could solve it is to let everybody major in job creation in the university. And therefore, once your program is job creation, when you finish, you can easily create what? A job. No. Unemployment could still go up even if the graduate did job creation or employment. So there's a link between what universities do by way of training and then the support mechanism in the system, such that when somebody exits, it's easier for the person to be able to transition, right, and operationalize their business model and the rest of them. We don't have that. We don't have that. Look, and I've always said that if you look at, in fact, since 2011, if you look at state-sponsored entrepreneurial programs that we have done in this country, it runs into billions of cedis. Please, who has done the tracer studies to show us where all these things ended? Okay, all our flagship entrepreneurial programs are nothing less than copying what the investors are doing. Training. And then when the state says that they want to give support to entrepreneurs, let the private sector be the channel through which the support will be what? Will be done. Look, we talk about 1D, 1F, right? A number of them are not working. Are you aware? And there are people who go for those facilities knowing that it's state money. Look at how much goes through mass law and the inefficiency and all of that. And that is why the youth start. I have a problem with it. That fine, if we want to do it, let the money be channeled through the financial institutions. If you're able to present a bankable proposal, EcoBank should be able to what?
I think that is what they are doing. Okay. Yes.
And the idea of party card holders and the rest of them. Let's do away with them.
So the youth starts, they are working with the Ghana Association of Bankers. That's what they say. And if you present your proposal,
you are bringing yourself.
No, I'm telling you what's I'm giving you the information so that you analyze the information.
And I know why I'm bringing this dimension, right? At the end of the day, people would want to assess the funds through political line rather than through sound business strategy. And the calls that will be made, right, to give it to this person and to give it to that person, we don't do that. Look, the state can never truly select entrepreneurs better than the market is capable of doing. Let the market select the real entrepreneurs from the acting ones. That is how we can grow this economy, you know. Then you're also looking at the friction. There's a limit to how your individual ingenuity can take you to in an environment that is constraining. There's a limit, right? So we are looking at making the macro environment business friendly. And when we talk about creating enabling environment, you know, we always talk about this, right? Since check 1992, our preoccupation has been creating enabling what? When do we get to that point? And actually, when we talk about enabling environment, what is it that exactly constitutes enabling environment so that when we've created it, we can see that this is it? We have to have some of these costing and trackings at what indicators. What level of interest rate can we say is enabling? What maturity of lending can we say is what? Is enabling? And the rest of, so that we begin to work towards that. And when things are hard like this, it's difficult getting basic calculation correct. Let me give you an example. I showed up
whilst Prof is giving the example, would like to invite some comments and the questions. My colleagues from the media. Yeah. Okay, so Prof, you wrap up for us.
I showed up somewhere Saturday to go and buy cocoa. And then when I gave the money, I was waiting for my change. And then the change she gave me wasn't accurate. I said, no. I said, and I was like, what has things are hard got to do with getting my change correct?
What is
So that is how difficult it is, right?
Every day you're calculating. As I'm sitting here, I'm calculating. Let's get some. Okay, it's a question. You introduce yourself, and then you give us your question or comment.
Actually, Nima, my boy. I'm a producer with Class FM, and I think Dr. Teo answered part of my question because, in addition to what he said, I think we need also effective implementation of policy directions. In a sense that, I mean, we've been to IMF several times, but anytime we go and we come, we don't see the impact. We don't feel it. It doesn't reflect in our economy. And Prof, you've been one of the persons who have been advising government to go to the IMF, if I'm right.
Can I respond to that? Please, we didn't go to the IMF because we had an option.
Okay. There was no option. That was why
what we were trying to say was that the way we were going, if we don't change course, then you only end up with what? With the IMF. Right. So there wasn't any option on the table. So it's not like there were credible options. And let me put this on record, that when government announced the measures, 30% salary cut, fuel this, fuel that, no fried rice, and the rest of them, we immediately said that these were not alternative program to the IMF. And that we need a government to come out with a credible alternative program that we can evaluate side by side what the IMF will bring. We never had that. Up to now, we don't have that. So if you don't, rather than all of us sinking, we'll tell you that it's better you go
to the IMF
and surrender to the IMF.
To the IMF.
Yes.
Oh, okay. So
it's not like I had a special preference for the IMF. For when we go there, I don't get anything. Yeah. When they come, we just met them this afternoon. There was no snack. There was just water.
Exactly.
Okay, so it's not.
Okay, so that's my point. So I just in conclusion, I think, like Dr. Teo mentioned, financial discipline and policy direction can even avoid us from even asking for external support, if you ask me. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Right.
Do we still have some?
I have a question here.
Okay.
Yes. My name is Caleb. I'm with Asasi Radio. Prof, it's been an enlightening conversation so far. And I just want to find out and pick your thoughts on our property taxes. And I don't have the figures. I haven't, thoroughly looked into that yet. But I feel it's being overlooked, looking at the properties that have sprung up in the capital, Kumasi, and other cities. And especially when we just had a census and metallic plates are just being put around buildings these days. I feel we have the database to leverage upon to go about generating revenue from our property taxes. But what exactly is the present state? How much are we supposed to get from this? And do you think that it's being overlooked as a taxation alternative means of generating revenue through taxes? Thank you.
Okay. Do we still have? Prof, would you want to respond? I should pick the next question. Okay.
Okay. My name is Issa with the Ghana News Agency. I would like to find out, as an economist, there are these suggestions that the current inflation rate we have is more than what is being reported by the Ghana Statistical Service. Do you share the same sentiment? Yeah.
Thank you. There's another.
Yeah, my name is Emmanuel Nia Franco Akuponsaki, Deputy Editor, Top FM and TV. Prof, the IMF has projected that the country's Ghana loses almost 5% of its annual GDP to tax exemptions, which means that we lose 22 billion cedis annually to tax exemption. As economists, what would be your advice to the government when it comes to giving freebies to foreign nationals or foreign companies?
Okay, so Prof.
Let me add a little to it. My name is Benes. I write for the Chronicle. Dr. Achampo mentioned that we have taste for foreign imports. But if you notice, you mentioned that you bought porridge, which is mainly made from food produced from Ghana. So it means that we are seeing a skyrocketing of even locally produced crops. For instance, beans, which is so like 2 cedis, 50. Yes, gobe. It's not so that 6 is going to 7 cedis. We have also seen millet, maize. So now what I'm asking is, what should the ordinary Ghanaian do apart from government doing something? Now we are all hungry. Oil, which is sold for 7 cedis, is now sold for 30 cedis or so. And a gallon of palm oil, which is produced locally here, is now 70 cedis, which was, I think, 15 cedis or so. So what should we do now? Now we are desperate. What should we do? In fact, me, I'm highly desperate because I'm confused. Because I go to the market and oil is from 15 cedis to 70 cedis, 7 cedis to 30 Ghana. I mean, please.
The lady doesn't joke with her, Gobe. But Prof, on the back of that as well, yesterday we had Dr. Kwachi of the Institute of Economic Affairs asking government to temporarily subsidize maize, rice and bread in the medium to short to medium term rather, to work on the inflation management. I don't know your take on that together with what she's asking for.
Yeah. There's nothing as difficult as trying to explain and offer solution in terms of what is happening right now, especially when you don't have control over translating that recommendation into actual and all of that. But we must still make that attempt. Let's look at it this way. Property tax, I know some estimates that suggest that annually we could get in excess of $500 million from property tax alone, right? Sometimes the challenge is that those who own the properties are the ones who must go and enforce those taxes, and so that they wouldn't want to tax themselves and all of that. What we are talking about here is not only politicians. Part of the problem this country is saddled with is what we call elite capture, right? Elite capture goes beyond just political capture. So you have top civil servants, you have top chiefs, top civil servants, top politicians, right, who gel at that apex level, and therefore they get to influence or hold back on certain things that must be done because it would affect them directly and all of that. But evidence do exist that we could collect more taxes through the property, and government itself acknowledges that there's more that can be done. In fact, there were some timelines about implementing certain interventions in the area of property tax. They give some certain timeline. I'm looking forward to the media review in terms of update on how well they are going with this. And there are some property owners that genuinely would want to pay the right property tax, okay, and contribute to the development of the country. I know there was a recommendation at some point in time that instead of keeping to the decentralized way of collecting the property tax, we should rather let GRA take over and all of that. But all those conversations, perhaps we should look at it. It's only in times like this that we can discuss certain things. So collectively we can what? Get out of this. If things were well, we wouldn't be sitting here talking about porridge, talking about gobe. You understand? Because the understanding is that when people's standard of living improves, they trade off consumption of lower end. They go for Cerelac. I hope you understand that. So when you mention Cerelac, I know you crossed the poverty line long ago, even if you didn't see the line and the rest of them. So that's what I'll say on that. There was another question about the current inflation being higher than what is reported. That perception is always there. As an academic, I cannot come out there and say that the inflation is higher than what is reported because I don't have the alternative. To say that 2 + 2 is not 5 is because you know it is 4. I hope that is okay. But what I can say is that even though what is reported, inflation being 29.something%, is just the average. So your inflation rate will be different from mine. Your inflation rate will be different from hers because your consumption pattern is different from mine. I hope that is okay. So when we are talking about measures to contain the impact of inflation, we look at it at individual level. Okay, so for instance, do you take beer? You don't take beer? Okay. So you take what? Sobolo. All right. So assuming the price of beer goes up and you don't take beer, it doesn't affect you. I hope that is okay. So as individuals, we are sitting here as households, as businesses, we can look at our consumption pattern and see what changes we can make as a way of containing that. But the point, I'll tie that in with the point our sister made, that if you look at what is driving the inflation, it's not only imported inflation. Local inflation is also rising. And that is why we make the point that it's a bit unfair to Russia to blame all that is happening here on bullets flying across Russia to Ukraine and vice versa, even if they made the headquarters of the war here. I hope you understand that. And COVID did not make it headquarters here. Okay, so there's a certain level of policy failure, right, that is crystallizing at a time like this. And that is where we will call to question the planting for food and jobs. Do you know something, colleagues? It is in crisis moments that we get to see the resilience of your policy. Something we say that ye musio train ope. Okay, so if the planting for food and jobs were working well, I hope that's okay. The food buffer that would have created, I hope that is okay. This is the time we can fall on what? Our reserves. This is the time. So, and when we say this, it's not because we don't like government. I hope that is okay. This was a beautiful policy intervention and the rest of them, but some of these flashy programs are expensively arranged, right, and inefficiently delivered. And at the end of the day, it tends to what? Do all of this. So that is where we find ourselves right now. Let me put it this way. A certain level of moderation is needful now, right? And as a family, as a household, let's look at what cost-cutting measures, postponing certain investment that we need to make or acquisition or something in order to what? It's better to stay alive, keep body and soul together. The day body and soul move apart, you are dead, right? So these are challenges that, let me put it that way. I remember telling my wife that I want to go and buy a bicycle. I'm waiting for her approval. Okay, so because if you look at the fuel and the rest, so today I parked my car and jumped into, because you put all these things together. I hope that is okay, because the idea is that you cannot continue to live the kind of lifestyle you lived 2 years ago, right? Under these challenging times, and the rest. So let's put it that way. But I believe that government needs to make a statement, and government needs to come out with certain measures to cushion Ghanaians in one way or the other. It may not look, some Ghanaians are not looking for so much to be happy. Okay? The long silence doesn't help. And I remember over the weekend, we were in one of the secondary schools, and you could see these are less than 18-year-olds who are not happy because the school feeding program in the secondary school is not going according to what? Plan. Some of them told us that they don't know whether it's water they are taking, or is soup, or is stew, or is whatever. So these are challenging times, and I believe that government alone cannot solve this. We all must come together. And I know that it's not easy with organized labor, but a certain level of moderation, right? Because if government were open and transparent, and I say that if you look at what happened in 2014, we managed that situation slightly better because there was a national economic forum, call it Royal what? Senchi consensus with experts, with labor, and all of that. So we had some level of concern that we were in a fix, and we needed to come together and all of that. But thankfully, now that probably the IMF is in town, government will open up a bit and engage and accept alternative views going forward.
Right. So I would like to take some social media comments also coming in from Facebook. Prof, I actually thought you were going to ask her to buy more gari and less beans, because you know when you add more gari, you
and
get...
Add more water.
Add more water. Well, Joseph Dakora is joining us on Facebook, and he has a comment here. On e-levy, I don't know why the government is being this tone deaf. Why squeeze water out of stone when you have already exerted all your energy in pulping straws without getting any water? People are not getting jobs. The few who are supporting these underprivileged, who should have come under the country's social welfare system, are also being taxed for transferring funds to support. Well, human beings are rational. Again, 1D1F is even confusing. Why do you convert existing companies that are paying taxes into 1D1F and giving them tax exemptions? Then you turn around and complain about low domestic tax revenues. And I'm sure that brings to the question of the Top FM editor. He was asking about why we're giving
exemptions up to that was what
companies.
I talked about earlier, that if you look at the exemptions, we lose between 3 to 5% of GDP annually to exemptions alone. And so we made the point that, look, if we'll fix exemptions, we don't need e-levy. We don't need that. And we know studies that have also been done in the area of VAT, in terms of the efficiency gap, in terms of corporate income tax, the gap along those existing tax handles. You will be amazed. When you do the costing and everything together, you realize that it's just because we are looking for more lazy way to burden the faithful few. And right now, look, let's put it this way. If anybody told you we are not paying enough taxes, that's not true, right? If you look at the layers of indirect taxes, and these days, I can assure you what some people are doing. Instead of shopping from the supermarket, where they will pay VAT, they will pay COVID levy, sanitation levy. Even if you had a copyright to the virus, you want to avoid the COVID levy, right? So instead of buying things from the supermarket, where they will pay all these layers of indirect taxes, VAT, 12.5%, NHIL, Get Fund, this levy, that levy. If you put everything together, we are hitting almost 19% on that dimension alone. So people rather prefer to go to the roadside and buy those things and avoid many of these layers. You are one of them, isn't it?
I'm not, but I have an experience.
Okay, so that was just the point I was making, that when economic rational people begin to see these things, they will constantly look for ways to offset the tax burden along other progressive tax handles, and that is unfortunate. So pick somebody who is in the higher income tax bracket, let's say 25%. So 25% of your salary is taken. It's left with 75%. Now, if you decide to spend 44%, okay, of the remaining 75% on consumption, food, because the data suggests that household expenditure, close to 44% is spent on food, and you buy these things mostly from the supermarket, you are paying close to 19% of taxes along that. Add that one to the 25%, right? You are hitting 50%. Then if you spend, let's say, 20% of that on fuel, okay, the tax loading on fuel alone is more than 40%. So add that one. So if you look at your effective tax rate as an individual, you are hitting more than 60%. Please, there is no way the average Ghanaian can accumulate savings to take advantage of the limited economic opportunity. And it isn't out of proportion that our savings mobilization rate is very, very what? Low. Because after paying for all these things, and you remember, we are not like the developed countries. Here, we grew up in a congregation. We are like Liverpool. You never eat alone. You never sleep alone. I hope you understand that. You don't know who is knocking on your door. I hope you understand that. People visit you with that memo. And
well, Prof, I'm sure we're not having any more comments or any more questions. Dr. Salome, I'm sure we've done justice to the survey as well. I just want to, Prof, your final remarks on the survey.
Yeah, thank you very much. I think the real economists have spoken through the survey. And my recommendation would be that government should listen. Okay, because there's a limit to how you can push the average Ghanaian, and they will not have a choice than to probably best out there and a whole lot of things. So I think government should take this survey in good faith and look at how we can design specific interventions. Let's move away from broad policies. Let's begin to look at specific policies that would address the key issues in our economy, and let's cut on wastefulness. You know something? There's too much wastefulness in this country that leaves very little to cater for the interests of the ordinary Ghanaian. There's very little, there's nothing national, let me put it that way. There's nothing national about the national cake. What is national about the national cake is that when you are present, when it's being shared, and it's not every Ghanaian that is at the table. Thank you.
Thank you so much. We can appreciate Professor Bokpin there. Thank you. Professor Bokpin is an economist and professor of finance at the University of Ghana Business School, UGBS. And earlier we had joining us online on Facebook, on Zoom rather, Dr. Theophilus Echampong, economist and political risk analyst there. Would also like to say a big thank you to Dr. Edem Salome, Director of Research, CDD-Ghana, and the entire team for the good work done. And I'm sure the Inky fraternity, my colleagues, would go out there to do justice to it. I already have my storyline in my head, my introduction. I don't know about you. And I've already seen some tweets also on the fact that 87% of Ghanaians say the country is moving in a wrong direction. 3/4 of the population also disapprove of e-levy. And what will be your say? Let's see what happens this evening in the headlines. But we appreciate your time. Professor Baole, thank you so much for your contributions, and all other invited guests, the media, we appreciate you as always. And I would like to remind you that these findings can be assessed on the CDD-Ghana website. It's www.cddgh.org. Again, www.cddgh.org. And the Afrobarometer website, www.afrobarometer.org. And to our viewers online, Facebook and YouTube, we appreciate you. Thank you so much. My name is Nana Ekuya Mensah Brampa. I've been your host and moderator for this afternoon's event. And well, I am also with TV3 Media General. Thank you so much for your time, and have a safe journey back to wherever you're coming from.